Hello, everyone. Thank you. It's wonderful to kick it off today. Thank you, Barbara, for that incredible introduction. My name is Saisha Grayson, and as the curator of time-based media at the Smithsonian American Art Museum, I am part of an institutional team honored to steward the Namjoon Paik archive and charged with presenting major television sculptures by the late artist in our galleries. Because collaboration is absolutely essential to Paik's work and importance as an artist, and is everywhere apparent in the archives and more subtly implied in the monumental sculptures, my talk today will emphasize the value of bringing these resources together as we frame this artist for our audiences. And first, because I'm speaking about collaboration, I just want to take a moment to sincerely thank all at the MMCA for the invite and the support, and for Ian for the travel logistics, and all those at my museum, the Smithsonian, who helped navigate bureaucracy so this travel could happen. It's very meaningful to me to be speaking of Paik's work in the city of his birth. For those who have not yet visited SAM, SAM is the National Museum in Washington, D.C., like MMCA, dedicated to the creative achievements of visual artists who have lived and worked in the lands now constituted as the United States. As the first institution to specifically collect American art, SAM embraces the challenges such demarcations bring to our work in the present. How do we define American? How can we become ever more reflective of the peoples and experiences that intersect with US identity? And how do we stay current to creative forms and practices that this hybrid cultural brew encourages over time? Early in our history, there was a commitment to inclusive collections, and we have major holdings of African American artists, self-taught artists, and artists who began their training and career elsewhere, like Paik, as well as those who work with non-traditional materials and craft materials. Extending and updating these commitments, SAM had the foresight to start a media arts initiative in 2007 to build and care for art made with advancing and ever-changing technologies. It is worth noting we had already begun collecting in this area before having a specialized department, almost entirely Paik Namjoon works. SAM purchased Paik's technology and Megatron Matrix shortly after each was made. In 2002, we were honored to receive the iconic electronic superhighway that Barbara mentioned, and this was a gift from the artist. So he recognized that we had already made a commitment to his practice and wanted this icon of the American map to be here, or not here, in DC. We also received the gift of Zen for TV from two museum supporters, Byung-Sol and Dolores An, in 2006. So it's fair to say then that the recognition of Paik's outsized impact on 20th century American art and contemporary art overall across the world was the precondition for the media art initiative announced the following year. Then in 2009, SAM embraced the great responsibility that came with the generous gift of the Namjoon Paik papers and object archives from the Namjoon Paik estate. And that came through the artist's nephew and executor, Ken Hakuda. Thank you very much. So with 55 linear feet of Namjoon Paik papers dating from the 1940s to the 2000s, as well as Paik's own reference materials, which date back all the way to the 19th century. Then 10,000 objects, ephemera, and print works in the 3D archives, all cataloged and carefully taken care of. SAM is now the Institute of Record and primary research destination for the study of this groundbreaking transnational artist. Oh, I missed him. Here's some great little objects and drawings. The TV clock in its entirety was sort of found in the archive and reconstituted, so that work enters our collection as well. And I should say we also celebrate his birthday. So if this is in celebration, we do programs, we sometimes do cake. And so, he is celebrated where we are as well. So with this long institutional prelude, I aim to set the stage for what it means to think about Namjoon Paik and collaboration at SAM, and with the resources and collection at hand. When I joined SAM in 2018, I had already spent a decade thinking about and researching Paik's work in relationship to his long-standing and perhaps most publicly defining collaboration with the avant-garde cellist Charlotte Moorman, who was the subject of my dissertation. Studying their interrelated creative journeys from their first meeting in 1964 to her death in 1991 and beyond, he continued to work with her legacy for a long time. I was also well attuned to the many other relationships, artistic interests, and the expansive network that Paik was juggling throughout his career. Moorman was not his only collaborator, so he was constantly sort of moving back and forth. For me, this incredible expansiveness of Paik's engagements and aspirations is a huge part of what makes him such a powerful force and prefiguration of the entrepreneurial international artists of today. Yet this aspect of his work was not readily available for SAM visitors to discover within our permanent collection galleries at the time I started at the museum. For nearly a dozen years, from 2006 to 2018, Paik was represented in these galleries via these two wall-sized video sculptures, Electronic Superhighway and Megatron Matrix. Both are masterpieces, but both also represent him at one point in his career, making grand-scale statements about the world on the cusp of telecom and computing revolutions, and how these would impact cultural connections across geographies, whether between Seoul and the world, as in Megatron Matrix, which incorporates footage and references to the 1988 Olympics that were held here, or in Electronic Superhighway across the 50 united but very distinct states that are outlined by neon in the work. They reflect a moment when Paik was well-resourced and able to realize works with hundreds, even thousands of monitors at scales appropriate for major museums and public centers, and with the support of studio assistants and technical specialists, all of whom were critical to production but not always credited as collaborators. This approach to a single authored work follows standard hierarchies of the commercial art world where Paik was increasingly operating at this time. But it stands in contrast to moments in his practice when collaboration was called out and celebrated. It also obscures the range of scales and strategies and insights Paik brought to creating over the decades. The full-blast video walls are such impressive, memorable spectacles that they can be hard to reconcile with an artist who, as Barbara mentioned, projected blank film reels that just accumulated dust and wanted you to attend to the little details, or who held a string across his shirtless back so Moorman could play him like an inanimate cello. This multifaceted version of Paik was compellingly evoked in Namjoon Paik Global Visionary, which was organized in 2012 by my predecessor at SAM, John Hanhart. This special exhibition drew heavily from the recently processed archive, but was only up for a few months. Yet SAM remains the holder of these archival treasures and a key institution for relaying Paik's legacy. There seemed to me a responsibility to be as iterative and expansive in our presentation of him as his career seemed to call for, and as in many cases his work requires. So the week I started at SAM, Megatron Matrix was actually being deinstalled to make room for an incoming exhibition. And our media conservator, Dan Finn here, he was completing a months-long documentation process to methodically capture, frame by frame, the changing sequences that play across 215 monitors. He also gained invaluable insight on the piece's animation programming, the bits behind the scene that make it work, from Young-Sung Lee, the electronics and video engineer who first worked with Paik in 1988 to make the More the Better, which has been so beautifully restored here at MMCA. And Lee helped build the processing hardware for Megatron Matrix, and he was an essential contributor to this, which is really one of Paik's most technologically complex works. It has these animations that play over multiple channels. However, unlike the Paik Abe synthesizer that in its name immortalized Paik's work with the engineer Shoyo Abe, Megatron Matrix is presented as a single authored work. So with Megatron Matrix coming off view and a floor-wide changeover in the permanent collection galleries ahead, I saw an opportunity to rethink the presentation of Paik's holdings at SAM and layer in the archive so that this broader network of exchanges and his spirit of collaborative engagement could become clear. Within a gallery focused on the interconnections of performance and media, we began to unfold just one of the many stories the Namjoon Paik archive can compellingly illustrate. how Paik's musical background and his involvement with Mormon and Fluxus expanded not only his practice, as it increasingly moved towards media art, but also the bounds of interdisciplinarity across contemporary art in ways that are still felt today. And so we could have one side of the gallery that really dove into the archive and the other that links him up with contemporaries like Anna Mendieta and Judy Chicago, and then into the present moment with Simone Lee and Chitra Ganesh. So through flyers, invitations, catalogs, photographs, posters, one video, Global Groove, all pulled from the archive, we were able to trace a narrative arc from Paik's arrival in New York just in time to appear in Mormon's second annual New York Avant-Garde Festival in 1964, and through their most famous collaborations, Opera Sextronique in 1967, to TV Cello in 1971, and to Guadalcanal Requiem in 1977. Along the way, the display called out the importance of Peter Moore, the photographer whose striking images of avant-garde performances and events has kept much of this work alive, and the designer of the New York avant-garde posters, Jim McWilliams, who was also the first to invite Paik and one of the first to invite Paik and Mormon to tour their wild interpretations of John Cage compositions in the mid-60s. Through the catalog and press release for TV as creative medium, one of the most important shows for media art history, we see Paik and Mormon making their mark together, debuting TV Bra for Living Sculpture, and garnering early support from Howard Weiss Gallery, a connection that's critical to both their careers. Weiss provided backing for Mormon's avant-garde festivals, and when his gallery morphed into Electronic Arts Intermix, it became the preservation and distribution center for Paik's video art catalog. And also we were able to include these great photographs that Peter Moore took from the festival where you see Namjoon with Juliette Weiss, so Howard Weiss's daughter. So we sort of unearthed these beautiful photographs of just kind of the play and the interactivity that happened during the festivals. The catalog and title for Paik's 1971 show at Gallery Bonino, Electronic Art 3, Paik Abe video synthesizer with Charlotte Mormon, it makes clear that this ostensible solo show is really all about collaboration, debuting the synthesizer made by the titular artist and engineer duo, and concerto for TV, cello, and videotape, a composition with Mormon at its center. Since Mormon's death, the various iterations of TV cello are often shown lonely on a plinth with crediting only to Paik. However, this ingenious instrument was based on a request from Mormon and refined through her feedback over the years. As beautifully captured in this photo by Moore, almost life-size, really has an incredible presence in the gallery. You can see what this collaboration made possible. And I'm going to zoom in on this one example because I hope to illustrate the broader point that for Paik, collaboration was both something intrinsic and necessary to the significant part of his production and to what he was interested in exploring as an artist and thinker. The inextricable imbrication of individuals within circuits of media, culture, capital, and power, and the feedback loops between artists, collectives, institutions, foundations, corporations, and so on, all of which could be plugged into to help manifest ideas in the world. Paik intuited that if those circuits and loops were what you were interested and wanted to address, it's simply not possible to do it alone, that different points of connection, skill sets, and partners would be crucial to reflecting revolutionary shifts in how humans were expected to operate. So what does that look like in a work, in a partnership? In this case, it looks like Charlotte Mormon debuting Paik's concerto for TV cello, TV cello and videotape at Gallery Bonino in 1971. When discussing TV cello and related works a few years later, Paik described Mormon as literally embodying live video art, as being a whole life video artist. In my analysis, I dig into what makes this possible and how much of the critique and insight that these works offer is dependent on Mormon's unique presence, her positionality, and her performative play with identity. Zeroing in on the specific context for Concerto for TV Cello, one finds that the expanding cultural regime of television at that time was simultaneously depending on women as privileged consumers of network programming and as commodities for consumption, eternally useful sales tools sprinkled across shows and commercials alike to keep eyeballs glued to the screens. In this moment, Moorman embodied the whole life experience of being both subject and object of constant televisual mediation in a way that only an attractive young white woman could. Her ability to appear not just as a living sculpture, but as a plausible lingerie model, sitcom or soap opera star, nighttime talk show guest, photogenic classical musician, as well as brand ambassador, is essential to the visual and verbal slippage between being on TV, being formed and informed by TV, and becoming TV that drives these works' critical edge. The complex interaction between the imaged, imagined, and embodied self is on full view as Moorman manipulates the visuals on these three stacked monitors. With her sights bounded by Paik's TV glasses, her entire being appears subsumed by screens. Their content includes live closed-circuit TV footage of Moorman herself in infinite regress, concurrent broadcast signals and pre-recordings of singer Janis Joplin belting her heart out, and composer John Cage tellingly playing a composition titled Cheap Imitation. Moorman's bowing and string slapping causes electronic interference so that amplified sounds distort the video signal. On one hand, this makes Moorman the primary author of the lived experience in the gallery. Yet her choices are made within a predetermined structure and content circuits in which she is just one feed. This combination positions Moorman within a relay that increasingly conflates surveillance and entertainment, cyborgian supplements, and newly mediated subjectivities. Rather than a benign humanization of technology, as is so often quoted as Paik's overarching aim, I see Concerto for TV Cello constituting an early, protracted investigation of how performance and television would come to be wedded, not only in dialectically linked mediums, but within individuals' identity construction and representations of themselves to the world. That is, a reckoning with how the technologization of all human experiences would affect each and every one of us. In this light, Moorman's calibrated interaction with feedback loops of her own image can be seen as foreshadowing the creative deployment of the self in and as a form of performance in postmodern theory and art practices, and her triangulation with Cage and Joplin as problematizing distinctions between imitation and real life, producing a constant vacillation between the self and its broadcast-ready simulacra. We can now appreciate how this presages the subsequent closed-circuit consciousness that we've all developed, fostered by reality TV, YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook Live, in which all of life's daily performances are inflected by their potential to be simultaneously captured and disseminated, and the desire to go viral has us all jostling for attention with the Joplins of the world. I believe both Paik and Moorman were highly attuned to what their gendered and racialized bodies carried into performance. And Paik relied on the collaboration with Moorman to advance certain insights that would just not have been possible or legible or accurate without her as a partner in literal crime. Yet this nuance is in danger of being missed when Paik's technological positivism is uninflected by Moorman's visual rhetoric. Turning to Paik's proclamations on two-way video communication, instead of looking closely at this scene, too many critics have missed the underlying and ongoing pessimism that accompanies Moorman's demonstration of an inevitable, all-encompassing mediated environment. Training our sights on the collaborative performance rather than the TV sculpture or cherry-pick quotes allows us to see the work otherwise. A human subject wrapped in screens, imbricated with commercial interests through which the illusions of choice in politics, products, or personas foment new desires and ideas of the self. Through their partnership, Paik and Moorman can not only address issues of power, control, communication, and instrumentalization, but also the complexities of their uneven distribution in the onrushing futures. And through displays of Paik's work that weave more of his collaborations and more of his complexities into Sam's galleries, audiences can grasp a fuller, more inflected picture of Paik as an artist and see him not as someone who had all the answers, but as someone who is wrestling with the questions and conflicts that remain important to their lived experience today. We are all now mini cyborgs at the center of our own mise en abîme. Isn't it good to know artists were wondering how this would feel way back in 1971? While the permanent collection gallery seen here opened in 2019 and was only viewable for a year before the pandemic closed our museum, it proved a perfect testing ground for how the archive could be part of Paik's representation going forward. In 2021, SAM's third floor closed for renovation, and in the fall of 2023, we will reopen our modern and contemporary galleries where you can see Electronic Superhighway holds a pride of place. Except now, with new architectural alignment by Seldorf architects, the walls on either side of the continent have been pushed out several feet. And so you can see that here in the diagram. So by having these extra feet, you can have room for cases to show the archive and to put other works on the wall. So for our first unveiling, we'll be able to show the layers of collaboration and networks of co-inspiration and endless coordination that contribute at every moment to the prolific work that comes together under Beknamjun's name. First, we will highlight how Paik, ever the nomad, sought to bridge cultural and physical distances with new technologies. Since electronic superhighway maps quite literally the geography of the US through media stereotypes, the archival display will showcase the connections Paik forged through the international satellite simulcasts that created Good Morning Orwell in 1984, Bye Bye Kipling in 1986, and Wrap Around the World in 1988. Through densely packed cases and framed prints on the wall, visitors can grasp what went into producing televisual events like these. Paik's letter to Michael Kunstow and BBC lays out the rationale and constant juggling acts of seeking international partners and support for Good Morning, Mr. Orwell. News clips that feature Paik's face and quotes suggest a whole press team ensuring that 5 million viewers tuned in. A postcard from a supportive gallery shows Art World connections working to get eyeballs on Wrap Around the World. Distorted Paik Abe synthesizer outtakes from satellite performances by Laurie Anderson and David Bowie, selected from boxes and boxes of prints that Paik made, show how much he celebrated these celebrity appearances. Paik's engagement with pop culture stars and publicity strategies is also clear in the glossy publicity headshots of Bowie and comedian and later Senator Al Franken. And unlike his partnership with Foreman, collaboration here shows what he wanted to unlock in this case. By working across an emerging global media village to make work about that global village, Paik's satellite works surface both the exciting possibility and all the contingencies that shape vectors of power in a communication age. While his rhetoric is entirely positive and optimistic in discussing these works, these projects also end up mapping which international centers have satellites and national or corporate support for culture, artistic brands, and what musical acts can resonate across borders, and the logistical infrastructure that it takes to participate in such satellite works. They also make apparent the consideration and frustration that giant bureaucracies and budgets impose on creative ventures. Finally, if collaborations during his creative life allowed Paik to wrestle with topics and offer commentary that were not possible alone, his way of working with technology also means that forevermore, his legacy is one that necessitates collaboration from institutions, media conservators, archivists, installers, engineers, and technicians, the estate, and even our visitors to keep alive. So now as we extend the walls, we're looking to documents and talking to the estate and the architects to imagine how Paik would want this work to stretch out if it was given more room. While the work is off view, our media conservators are upgrading players and embedding flat screens into CRT housing to ensure that the smaller monitors can continue to shine for decades to come. This is the joy of working with Paik's archive, legacy, and masterpieces within the context of SAM and in dialogue with external partners. There are so many who are part of the process, continuing in the spirit he modeled, bringing in with each new venture those who can most expand his reach and project it into the future.
Thank you.